Good evening and good Erev Shabbos, everybody, and thank you so much for joining me. When you think about it, there are many words that a person could use to describe themselves. A person could say, I am short. One could say, I am tall. I could say, I am smart. I could say, I am not so smart. I could say about myself that I am hardworking, and I could say that I'm lazy. I could describe myself as being arrogant, but can I truly describe myself as being humble? Could a person say about themselves, I am very humble? Does that statement not in and of itself sort of compromise that humility? Does it not call that very claim to question? After all, if I'm saying about myself that I am humble, seemingly in a fashion in which I sound like I'm bragging, doesn't that in of itself mean that I am not really all that humble? Well, I ask you this question because there is a very strange pasuk that is found in this week's parsha, Parshas Bahaloscha, where towards the end of the parsha, in the aftermath of the incident involving Aaron and Miriam's conversation about Moshe Rabbeinu, so the Torah tells us, "V'ha'ish Moshe anav ma'od mikol adam asher al pnei adama," that Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest of humble men across the entire planet Earth. That there was no one in the world who was as humble as Moshe. Now that's a very strange statement, because after all, we know that Moshe Rabbeinu himself dictates, writes down, transcribes the words of the Torah that are written by God. So even though perhaps Moshe was not necessarily the one to first articulate these words, by virtue of the fact that he was the one to transcribe the words of the Torah, does Moshe not sort of lose a certain degree of credibility, so to speak, by saying about himself that he is so humble? So that's the first question. And I'll ask you a similar question coming from a completely different source, that the Mishnah at the end of Masechah Sota tells us that there were certain Tanoim, there were certain sages in the times of the Mishnah that were so great and distinguished in their deeds that when they left this world, when they died, so it was sort of like the end of an era. And the Gemara lists many Tanoim and ways in which they were most distinguished. And the Gemara says that when Rabbi Yehuda Nasi died, the Mishnah says, Mishemes Rabbi Batla Anava. There was no more humility in the world, as if to imply that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was such an exceedingly humble person. There was really no one who matched him in his humility. And so therefore, when he died, so that was it. It was like the end of an era. There was no more true humility in the world. So that's the Mishnah. At the end of the Gemara, which is found literally in the last couple of lines of Masechah Sota, so the Gemara tells us that Rabbi Yosef said regarding this, Lotisni Anava, that you should not say, that it's incorrect, that when Rebbe died, there was no more Anava, there was no humility in the world. Deha'ika Anna, says Rabbi Yosef, because after all, there's me. So Rabbi Yosef himself, in this case, literally declaring about himself, says that I am humble. I am a truly humble person. So how could you say that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who died many years earlier, Batla Anav, it's not true. I am an Anav. And so therefore I ask the question again, how could it be that somebody says about themselves that they are such humble people? So perhaps we can gain some insight into this from an interesting Gemara. The Rambam in Hilchos Tefillah, in the 5th chapter, summarizes an interesting din that is found in the Gemara Brachos, that when it comes to davening Shemona Esrei, we know that it is proper practice and procedure for a person who is davening to bow in the beginning and the end of the first 2 brachos, and we do so as well. I'm sorry, I apologize. We bow in the beginning and at the end of the first bracha, and we bow again the beginning and the end of the bracha of Modim, and then we bow again before we take 3 steps back. So in total, there are 5 kriyos. Hamispalo korea chamesh kriyos b'chol tefillah tefillah. Person who davin, says the Rambam, bows 5 times. And then the Rambam says, B'ameh devarim amurim, when is this true? This is true when it comes to a hedyot, meaning when it comes to a person like you and I, a regular person. But a Kohen Gadol, the high priest, so he bows down at the beginning and at the end of every bracha. At the beginning and end of every bracha in Shemona Esrei. V'hamelech, and the king, he bows down in the beginning of the Shemona Esrei, and Eino Magbia Rosho ad shegomer kol tefillah. So he does not lift his head until he finishes the entire tefillah. So the halach is that a hedyot, that a layman, bows essentially 4 + 1, 5 times in the Amidah. The Kohen Gadol bows at the beginning, at the end of every bracha, and a melech would bow down in the beginning and remain in that position until the end. So you would think it should be the other way around, right? Wouldn't it be that the greater a person is, the more distinguished an individual is, perhaps the less that they have to bow? And someone such as myself, a simple hedyot, I'm not a Kohen Gadol, I'm not a melech, I'm just a nobody. So therefore, what am I going to do? I'm going to go ahead and submit myself in the most extreme way before God. So how do we understand this? There is a Mishnah in Maseches Sanhedrin which tells us that a person is obligated to say the words B'shvili nivra ha'olam, that a person should say the world was created for me. And the idea, it's understood in context over there, Rashi over there explains that basically each and every person should see him and herself as being irreplaceable, that I have my own unique characteristics, my own special abilities, and I am like no one else. Each and every person, just like we have our own unique DNA, our fingerprints are different. It's not just that, but our personalities are different. Chazal tell us that just like people have different faces, people have different deos. People's personalities, their dispositions, proclivities, whatever it is that makes me tick, makes me unique, and it's different than you. And so therefore, each and every person possesses their own unique tools, which carry the potential for me contributing to the world, hopefully in a meaningful and a positive, but most importantly, in a unique way. So everybody has their own portfolio of talents and skills and ideas, which make me unique and special. For some, it's athletic ability. For some, it's musical talent. Some people have good looks. Some people have intelligence. Some people are very gifted writers. Others are gifted speakers. We have to realize that every single person is truly valuable and irreplaceable. And if we're successful in this world, we take our own unique abilities and talents as well as our weaknesses and challenges, and we harness them, and we look for ways to achieve personal greatness. So coming back to the question we started, what is anivos? Wherein lies the difference between anivos and gaiva, humility and arrogance? So most people think that a typical anav walks around saying, I'm not good at anything. I'm not good. I can't play ball. I can't speak. I can't sing. Nobody likes me. I have no friends. I can't do anything. And that's like anivos. That's humility. Look, the guy's so humble. He's so self-effacing. He can't do anything. And a Baal Gaiva, he just walks around and says, yeah, I'm pretty good at this. Look at me. Did you ever see me speak? Did you ever see me write? Did you ever see me do this, that? But this perception is actually not correct. True anivos, humility, does not mean that I deny who I am. If anything, such a self-description, such a self-effacing individual is probably lacking in self-esteem. A person who says about himself, I'm worthless, I can't do anything, that's not humility. That's just, person just sort of denying what it says in the Mishnah. Rather, humility means that I need to remember at all times, number one, where it comes from. I have to remember that if I am who I am, if I have certain talents and abilities, if I have what to contribute to this world, it's not because of my own contributions alone, but rather it's because of the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has gifted me with certain unique talents and abilities, hoping that I will use them in the right way. And so therefore, I would say that if a person wants to work towards achieving true humility, so there are two important things that one should keep in mind at all times. The first one is that nothing truly belongs to us. Our intelligence, our physical appearance, our sense of humor, our material possessions, they are all essentially on loan from God. Hashem invests, as it were, his assets where he hopes that they will be most profitable. But all that is given to us is truly and strictly on a sort of a trial basis. In fact, Chazal tell us that if a person misuses or perverts their strengths and character traits, so this is a form of gezela. It's sort of misappropriating that which has been given to me with a certain purpose in mind. Obviously, our accomplishments in life are due to a large extent because of our own effort and hard work. But without constant assistance, siyata d'shmaya, support from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we can accomplish nothing. We're going to read in the Haftarah this week, Parshas Baloscha, lo b'chayil v'lo b'koach, ki im beruchi, amar Hashem tzivakos. It's not because of your strength. It's not because of your own efforts. Rather, it's because of what I have given you, says God. The second consideration, which I think must always be kept in mind for a person who wants to achieve a genuine sense of humility, is that while I may be popular and admired by my peers, I am nothing in comparison to God himself. True closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu will yield an overwhelming sense of modesty and humility, which will naturally, without any effort, temper any potential feelings of gaiva, of arrogance. So coming back to the questions which we started, how could Rabbi Yosef say about himself, wait a second, Vo'ika, now what about me? I'm a truly humble person. So perhaps, as some suggest, if we understood a little bit about the life of Rabbi Yosef, we would understand this, because Chazal tell us that Rabbi Yosef was a great, distinguished Talmid Chacham. At the prime of his life, his career, if you will, he was considered to be the Gadol Hador. People would come from all over to seek his guidance, his counsel, his psak halacha. And at a certain point later in life, he became ill. He became blind, and he seemed to have experienced what we would say today some form of dementia. He forgot a lot of what he had learned. In other words, he had fallen from a place of great personal achievement and greatness to an individual who unfortunately was unable to demonstrate, he was unable to reflect, he was unable to remain noticeably distinguished in the way that he once was. And so therefore, he said about himself, don't tell me that there's no more anivos, there's no more anava, humility in the world. What about me? I can tell you, because I've experienced that you could be on top of the world and suddenly you could lose it all. Just because I have something today doesn't necessarily mean I will have it tomorrow. And this realization will allow a person to achieve the genuine sense of anivos. Why was Moshe Rabbeinu able to declare himself as being the greatest anav in the world? And yes, it is true, HaKadosh Baruch Hu fed him that line. V'yish Moshe anav ma'od mikol adam asher pnei adama. But how could Moshe remain an anav, having said that? So the answer is because of his relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not despite his close relationship with Hashem, but dafka because of it. He was constantly living in the shadow of God. In fact, if you read the context in which we find those psukim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was saying, Moshe and I, we are very close. I speak to him kasher yadaber isha reyehu. I speak to him as if you would speak to a peer. And so therefore, living constantly in this awareness, in the shadow of God, so that is naturally going to be a very, very humbling experience. Moshe was able to say about himself how much of an anav he was, because he never, not for a moment in his life, could he possibly forget who he was in relation to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Halacha l'maisa, bottom line, each and every one of us should strive to achieve a sense of humility in our lives. For some, it may come easier than others. Halacha l'maisa, practically speaking, I can't tell you here, do these two things, these three things, and all of a sudden you will become a humble person. It's a life. It's a lifelong endeavor. But I would say a couple of things, and that is that if we can allow ourselves from time to time to recognize and to actually acknowledge to others our faults, when an apology is due, be it to a spouse, to a parent, to a friend, to a colleague, this is something which can instantaneously cool the ego. For a person who likes to imagine from time to time that I am beyond reproach, that I am basically, compared to the people who I interact with, people around me, I am somebody who's without fault. So therefore acknowledging, and it happens from time to time, it's an inescapable reality of life. Acknowledging that, you know what, I'm not perfect, I made a mistake, I messed up, I'm going to try better tomorrow. That in and of itself is something that can allow a person will facilitate the process of achieving a genuine sense of humility. Additionally, I would say training ourselves to ask questions from people around us. Chazal tell us, Ezeu chacham halo meid mikol adam. If a person wants to achieve true wisdom in this world, chachma, knowledge, you want to become a knowledgeable person, so seek out wisdom, not just from people who I would understand and recognize and appreciate are quote unquote smarter than me, people with more experience, but even people perhaps who are less experienced, people perhaps who are less knowledgeable. But Halomim Mikol Adam, in addition to the fact that this is something which is konfaster chachma, as Chazal tell us, it is also something which is naturally humbling to recognize and to appreciate that I can learn from anyone. And perhaps within the realm of Ben Adam Lamakom, going back to what I said beforehand, that if we want to become truly humble people, we have to recognize constantly how we are living in the shadow of God, and our existence and all that we have in this world is only because of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's constant siyata d'shmaya assistance. Perhaps to be mechazik ourselves within the area of brachos, that we have the opportunity each and every day, before we eat, after we eat, when we leave the bathroom, when we have the opportunity to daven, when we are able to appreciate the incredible wonders within nature, to recognize and to stop and to say with genuine kavana, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shehakol niyeh b'dvaro. Saying those words in a way that is genuinely meaningful takes an additional second or two from what it means if a person is just, Chazal say, zorek bracha mipiv, person just literally just sort of, the words just sort of roll off his tongue. But to say it with just a little more meaning, to slow down just a little bit, could make all the difference in the world and allow a person to once again come to a place, a mindset, not necessarily at one specific time in a very, very focused way, but throughout the day. Me'ah brachos b'chol yom gives people many opportunities to sort of check in for a few seconds and remind myself, don't get carried away. Lo b'chayo v'lo b'koach, ki im beruchi, amar Hashem. And so therefore, may each and every one of us be zocheh to come to a place that both within our interactions with other people, as well as within our interactions with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, within the realm of Ben Adam Chaveiro and Ben Adam Lamakom, may we try to see ourselves for who we are, hopefully recognizing and appreciating the unique talents, strengths, and abilities, as Chazal tell us, Chayiv Adam Lomar, B'shvili Nivra Olam, but at the same time recognize that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given these traits and abilities to me, and He has given them to me because He wants me to use them in order to be Ma'aber Kvod Shemayim, and to recognize that I could lose it at any point. And hopefully, if we can maintain this awareness, foster it, and strengthen it over time, we too can hopefully become truly, genuinely, authentically humble people. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful Shabbos.